So, Mark Hill from Greenleaves. I'm today considering the People's Referendum, which is reaching its crescendo in the House of Commons very shortly, with the Yvette Cooper amendment. Yvette Cooper is a Labour, senior Labour Party MP who is also chair of a select committee and therefore has a certain status within the Commons, and is proposing an amendment to the meaningful vote legislation, which would extend Article 50's effect through to the end of December 2019. Now, this would have a significant number of effects, but one of them is that it would make possible a people's vote. And in fact, I think that at its core, the Cooper Amendment is about extending the people's vote. It's about giving the people's vote a chance to succeed. And this has a certain amount of sympathy across the left. For example, Brendan O'Neill in Spiked Online magazine. I would quite like there to be a people's vote in this way, in this sense, that I think that the moaning has to be silenced, and the fact that we only won, the Leave side won by only 52 to 48%, it was a marginal victory. And in fact, after all of the aggro that's been going on for nearly 3 years now, I would quite like the Remain side to be beaten thoroughly, properly. And I think that now, if there were to be a people's vote, that would happen. And we would cleanse ourselves. The people's vote supporters would finally lose in a manner that they understood. And they would be sad and they would grieve. And the European Union would have been beaten. And everyone could get over that in their minds, grieve if they have to. And then we could go past this. And certainly inside the Green Party, it's quite obvious that many people have just still not accepted the 2016 referendum result. However, there are two very clear reasons why I oppose the Yvette Cooper amendment. One of them is that we will end up with a European election. And that European election will be starting extremely soon. The Electoral Commission has already announced that the controlled period for controlled expenditure is already in play, and people who are campaigning therefore are subject to election expenses restraints already. The election would be in May, but many of the preparations would have to be done by probably the beginning of next month, February. And it would be an awful Euro election. Be a Euro election about the European Union, as if the last one in 2014 wasn't. And let me remind you that in 2014 it wasn't Labour or Tory that won the European election. It was UKIP, and by a margin. And then they went on to come a very considerable third in the 2015 general election. I think they got about a third of the Labour Party vote. UKIP basically beat all of the other minor parties and were beginning to contend for second party status. If we had a Euro election this summer, it would be dreadful. And we would be sending MEPs to the European Union that would be basically very destructive of the European Union. Not just mildly opposed like UKIP were. We would end up with people who wanted to really destroy it from within. I don't think that's going to be very good for the European Union, and much as I dislike the European Union, I don't particularly wish that on them. So I hope that if nothing else, the Cooper Amendment, if it goes through, is rejected actually by the European Union, who I think for organisational reasons now should be very much against the idea of there being an extension. We should leave properly on the 30th of March. I think the other reason why it's wrong is politically wrong, because it's identifying those parties that vote for it. Green, certainly. Scottish National Party, I very much expect. Liberal Democrats, of course. And then the Labour Party, and they're the most interesting. The Labour Party will probably vote for this, if only because Theresa May is going to vote against it. And and that will be true of the bulk of Labour MPs, but perhaps not all. The problem is that it then identifies all of those parties that vote for the Cooper Amendment as being in favour of people's vote, in other words, of being in favour of the European Union. Now, Labour wants to get a parliamentary majority, and it can only do that by winning seats off really two other political parties. They are the Scottish National Party, and I'm going to ignore Scotland for a moment because I think that Scottish politics is actually relatively different, and the Conservative Party. And certainly in the Conservative Party's case, those seats are in places like the Thames Valley, they're in Midlands and Northern England. And that's in addition to retaining the seats which they won, perhaps unexpectedly, in unexpectedly large quantities in metropolitan areas and particularly university towns. Now that is going to become harder if Labour has to win seats which are held by the Conservatives and they have badged themselves as pro-Remain by voting for the Yvette Cooper Amendment. If you vote for the people's vote, if you vote for the Cooper Amendment, you're opening up the possibility of this tortuous debate continuing on until December. And actually, I suppose, like many people, I just want it resolved now. And I think that the most elegant answer is for us to confront the EU with the poor quality of the deal they've offered and just vote it down and continue to vote everything down and get to a point where the European Union starts to negotiate with us properly. And I frankly don't think that's going to be between now and the 29th of March. Now, I think the Conservatives are eventually going to lose the next general election. I think they've demonstrated such poor leadership over the past 3 years that Theresa May certainly, well, she's already recognised that she is a goner. I don't necessarily think that Labour will benefit if it decides to regard itself as pro-EU. And that isn't to say that its members aren't. I completely understand that its members have all got hooked into this Remain cult, which refuses to see any other point of view and refuses in particular to note that there are many of us on the organised left and the disorganised left and amongst the Greens and amongst their own voter base that voted against the European Union that they so profess to love. I'd go further. I say this on 29th of March there are going to be parties and events at which it would be good for Labour Party people to be seen. On 29th of March we're going to be celebrating, we're going to be proud of what we managed to achieve to get us out of the European Union. Hopefully without a bad deal, and certainly all the deals on offer, including the withdrawal agreement, appear to be very poor, even without the backstop. But those parties are nevertheless going to be heartfelt. And I think it's going to be good for Labour people to be seen at those parties, even if they have only recently come to the view that Leave was the right idea. Because I think that Labour needs to be seen as the party of all of the people, not just those people who voted Remain in June 2016.